Hello, everybody. In this episode, we're joined by Denis Carruthers, the chairman of Licola, and my co-host is Phil Emilhane. I hope this episode answers some of the questions you may have about Licola and its future. So welcome to this episode of Between the Lions, and congratulations on your appointment, Denis. Could we just start off with what are your plans for the future of Licola?
Well, look, I think at the moment, Megan, it would be true to say that long-term plans have not been put together. The short-term plan is to stabilise Licola in the post-COVID era, and that's got lots of challenges arising from that. So I guess our focus right now is to stabilise Licola and put building blocks in place, A, to secure the future of Licola, and B, then to provide a platform that we can grow from.
Would you like to just elaborate a bit on those building blocks that you're going to be putting into place?
Well, maybe it's best if I can just wind back and just talk very briefly about the post-COVID environment that Licola is operating in. And I think I think most people would understand that a lot of businesses and organisations are facing lots of challenges and headwinds as a result of COVID. In the case of the outdoor education industry or the outdoor camping industry, which Licola is obviously part of, one of the key things that's happened post-COVID is that a lot of the itinerant staff, outdoor education staff, the professionally trained and accredited staff, have simply vanished. Post-COVID, those people pretty much, did a term here, a term there. They went to Queensland in the summer and, they did terms at different schools. And Licola was always able to, secure sufficient outdoor education professionals to run the camps, and in particular, the Lions-sponsored camps. So that's a big issue. And I think a lot of these people probably have found other jobs. And in some cases, they've been given long-term contracts to, with some of the, better finance schools. So the schools can be assured of having those people on site. So that's certainly a challenge. The other challenge that we found is that there's been quite a fall-off in volunteers wanting to come and attend the camps and assist with the camps. And I read somewhere recently that across Australia post-COVID that the number of people volunteering has dropped by close to 2 million.
Wow.
So these are not Licola-specific issues. They are, broader issues. But Licola is certainly impacted by it and exacerbated to some extent by its remote location. If you look at places like Cottage by the Sea and the Portsea Camp, which are more easily accessed, Licola, a lot of people don't want to spend time, in an isolated environment where if you want to go down to the pub for a drink and something to eat, you'd have to drive down to, 45, 50 minutes to Hayfield, which is the nearest town. And finally, I think the other thing that's affecting us is post-COVID, the cost and availability of buses is proving to be quite a challenge. And the cost particularly has skyrocketed. And again, a lot of bus drivers post-COVID have simply vanished out of that industry and either retired or they've done other things, I'm not sure. So even when you can get buses, sometimes, the availability is impacted by, the staffing. So these are all issues I think that we can deal with over time and hopefully will right themselves. So in a financial sense, Licola obviously went through a long period with no revenue, and a lot of the costs associated with a 75-acre property keep ticking over. So the last 2 years, Licola has actually made quite a significant loss, although most of that loss was attributable to depreciation. Because some years ago, Licola installed solar panels and battery storage system, and that costs a lot of money. So that's being depreciated down. So for the next 2 or 3 years, that will be a similar outcome. But in cash-wise, last year Licola broke even. So back to your question, in terms of building blocks, one of the things that we are actively pursuing is seeking funding of a more substantial nature. Right now, Licola, or certainly historically, Licola has survived by, the revenue from the camps and other users, and that's still occurring. And a lot of ad hoc grants and donations by Lions clubs, districts, some local businesses and so on, but we can't rely on that. So we are engaging at the moment with the philanthropic sector, and we're working with a particular organisation that is very much embedded in that sector. And we've only just started that process, so I probably not best to go into too much detail yet because it's very early days, but certainly the plan and the expectation is that over the next 12 to 18 months, we can start and secure some more stable funding. And that's what will allow us to put more money back into Licola. I think we're ultimately going to have to pay for people to volunteer and support the camps, all of which has got a cost associated to it.
I believe that there has been a whole lot of infrastructure projects that have been going on at Licola.
Licola is an ageing facility. A lot of the houses date back to 1950. They're the original sawmillers' family homes. The hot water system is very old, or the one that's been replaced was very old. It was unreliable, couldn't get parts for the gas boilers and so on, and there was a lot of water leaking out of them. The pipes are all underground. So it was a very costly and inefficient system. We could never run on all of the 4 boilers. So the replacement of that system cost close to $100,000. It was funded jointly between District V3, the Australian Lions Foundations, and Lions Clubs International Foundation. So we were able to get those funds together, and that project was completed early this year. And that will mean an annualised saving going forward of around $35,000 a year in gas usage. So, it's the return on investment, if you like, is pretty good for that. $100,000 spent, 3 years' time is basically paid for by the savings. So, that's been a major project and a major focus. We've also been putting a lot of focus back on the houses. As I mentioned, they're all pretty old. They are in the main sponsored by individual Lions clubs. And again, as a consequence of COVID, some of those houses haven't been touched for several years. And it's good to see now that most of the clubs are back on deck and getting a lot of work done. We've also employed a second full-time maintenance person at Licola, and that now gives the Licola people the opportunity to actually get in and do a lot of work themselves and not necessarily rely on the clubs, which can be quite spasmodic in terms of when they turn up and what capacity they have to do some of the work required. It's an important issue because, a lot of schools use Licola, and increasingly their expectations on the standard of accommodation are increasing.
Yes.
So we have to make sure that the facilities that we have at Licola, notwithstanding that it's a wilderness camp, in an isolated location, we have to make sure that we are meeting the broad expectations of the people that use it.
And that would also mean that you can sort of branch out in your market. It doesn't have to just be school camps. Oh,
no. We, Trev Carson, the camp manager, have been actively pursuing universities. We've had a number of good bookings from universities, and they're actually very good for Licola because they turn up and they are entirely self-supporting. Mm. So all we have to do is basically open the gates, they drive in, and we shut the gates when they drive out, and that's about it. Obviously, we've got to have the cabins prepared and all the rest of it that goes with it. So, the more of that type of usage we can get, and we've got some other plans as well to sort of keep broadening that base as we get more funding available to do that. That will certainly help Licola.
Yes, I think it was pre-COVID, you were sort of branching out into the wedding market as well.
No, look, there is a church on site which will take, I think, Ian Stockdale. Well, I think it's the Ian Stockdale Memorial Church. But look, the realities are that the church is very small. You can't get a lot of people in. It's a very small building. The accommodation probably for most wedding parties is really not what people would expect. And then you got the issue of catering. Licola is just unable to cater for, wedding parties and things like that. So, look, it's a nice idea, and certainly it was floated for a while, but it never got any traction for those reasons.
Denis, can I ask a question? Just getting back to the houses, the Lions clubs that take on a house to support the house, what are the obligations for that Lions club?
Well, look, essentially, Phil, the main obligation is to keep the house or maintain the house in a acceptable standard. So we've introduced a common interior colour scheme, and the houses are progressively being painted, a light colour. We're progressively replacing the awful old carpet floors with floating floors, which are much easier to maintain. The houses inside were, and still are in some cases, pretty dreadful colour schemes, and a lot of the kids that turn up for camps can be actually adversely affected by some of the colours. So again, the clubs are progressively, working their way through repainting all of the old stained timber.
So sorry, this is hands-on work by the Lions themselves.
It's hands-on, yep. And again, a lot of the furniture, the sofas and seats, they were cast-offs from someone's lounge room, 30 years ago, and they've been sitting up at Licola all that period of time, and, you sit down and you sink to the floor, literally. So, look, some of them are okay. A lot of it is not really right. So it's just a case of keeping it clean, tidy, inside and outside, keeping the furniture and bits and pieces up to date as required. So, look, every house is different in terms of what's needed at what point of time, but it's like maintaining your own house at home, keeping it up to scratch.
Yeah, understand.
And as I say, the beauty of having more hands on deck on ground is that the Licola maintenance guys can come in and fix, a broken tap or a leaking tap without having to wait for a club to turn up maybe in 6 weeks' time.
Sure.
And they may not have the capacity or skills to actually do some of that work anyway.
So when the maintenance, the on-site maintenance guys do work like that, is there a cost for that back to the club?
Look, no, at this stage not. But I think if we get into more serious work, like replacing decks, which we're starting to do, a lot of the decks are rotting. We are going to have some discussion, I think, with the clubs on that. And again, look, as you know, a lot of the Lions clubs have got an ageing demographic, and the days of, ripping up a deck and putting a new one down or getting up on the roof and replacing, roofing or guttering, it's beyond quite a few of the clubs now. And we actually don't want to see people trying to get up on the roof and do that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah.
So, some clubs may engage tradespeople to work at Licola as required. Some of the houses need to be re-stumped, which is quite it's a technical job to be done. So really, it's just a mixture of things, Phil. But again, to come back to your question, we have those discussions as required with the clubs. But at the moment, we are not doing that.
Yeah. So, Denis, it would be pretty hard then to set a budget for 12 months for a club to support a house. They wouldn't really know what they're up for.
Well, Trev Carson, the camp manager, has prepared a list of work required at all the houses, and that's been distributed to all of the clubs.
Right.
So they've got a pretty fair idea of what's involved, and what they can do themselves, and what they may have to seek help with.
And I noticed there's 3 houses available at the moment.
Yes, 14, House 14 and House 15 and 16, which is basically 2 houses that have been pretty much joined together. So it's essentially 2 houses.
Right.
House 15 and 16 has been fitted out for special needs people, and that's actually that's in good condition. There's not much work required on 15 or 16.
Right.
So for a club to take that on, that would be quite a straightforward job at this stage because the work has been done. House 14, that needs a bit of work. Again, painting inside, floating floors, probably a new kitchen.
Yep.
Again, some of the clubs are putting in the caboodle kitchens from Bunnings, $800,000 or $900,000, which are perfectly acceptable in that environment.
Okay.
So feel free to step forward, Phil, and
I think, look, it's on our agenda. We'll certainly talk about it, I suppose. So we have the same problem as most Lions Club at the moment. Our membership is very small. As you mentioned before, we're all aging.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of what can we afford and really what can we do ourselves. So I think in the first instance, I'll probably recommend that we come down and have a look one day and just see what it's all about and look for ourselves.
See, it could be, there's other facilities at Licola. So it could be, you might want to take on, or a club might want to take on the laundry, for example, which needs quite a bit of work. And there are other facilities there. So it doesn't have to be necessarily one of the houses.
Yeah, and I understand.
And a laundry, I just picked that off the top of my head, but that's pretty straightforward.
Yes,
that's not a big job to look after that.
But I think going back to your annual report, it's a very good overview of what the Licola is all about, and I think we'll get that out to our members, and they'll certainly know what we're talking about.
Yeah, no, that's good, Phil. Thanks for that. We've only just finished this, actually, and I'll certainly be getting this distributed to all the districts, all the B districts in Victoria, and hopefully to each individual line. We've got the annual general meeting coming up on the 25th of June. It would be good to see a few people along for that. I think historically there hasn't been a big attendance at the AGM.
Yeah.
But you'll have read probably what I've written, and I think Licola, until recent times, has sort of fallen off the radar a little bit from the...
Yeah, so COVID didn't help, of course.
No, absolutely not. But I think even before that, I suspect, because it's been around a long time and it's just ticked away in the background, people, a lot of people just sort of forget about the fact that it exists.
Yeah.
So I think it's timely to sort of put Licola back, at the forefront of Lions in their broader thinking. And I think that's happening. And as I said, we're getting great support right through now, which is really good.
Denis, are you still going to be running the special camps, Wild 4 and those camps that were started for troubled youth?
Well, the short answer is yes, Megan, as long as we can get the professional support to run them. The Wild 4 camps in particular are quite a different type of camp, so that requires quite specialist support, and we're actually working with someone right now that may be able to get a Wild 4 camp up and running in a few months' time. We would certainly like to do that. And we're also looking at maybe expanding the age groups for camps as well. So, but again, I come back to what I was talking about initially, adequate funding, so that we can actually do these things. Right now, we don't have the capacity to do that as much as we would like to. Yeah. But, if we can secure the support of organisations or individuals, then that will certainly make a big difference in getting some of those up and running. But again, as I said at the beginning, the building blocks now, the key ones obviously is getting that stronger and more secure funding base. Yeah. And at the meantime, finding the right people to support it. That's as big a challenge, quite frankly, at the moment, as is finding people with some money that they'd like to put our way.
Qualified staff is really a huge mountain to climb at the moment.
It is, because all of the activities down at Licola, if you haven't been there before, you'll see that it requires specific accreditation to do a lot of those activities. So, you and I just couldn't jump in and say, okay, I'm going to volunteer. And one of the issues with volunteers is that a lot of them don't really appreciate what is actually involved in volunteering at a camp. You're going to have to look at providing training for people. And I said before, I think we may have to end up with a paid contingent of people at some point that are experienced and know what's involved. And again, that's another core requirement for getting camps up and running.
Yes, because it's a huge responsibility, isn't it?
It certainly is. Yes, it is. Again, it's an isolated location. So got to make sure that there's no chance or absolutely minimal chance of, injury or anything like that.
And Denis, just a quick question about your roads out there, because I've travelled by bus to Licola a couple of times, and that road is...
Yeah, it's an interesting drive, isn't
it? Yeah. Yes.
But, that comes with being in the bush. I can tell you there's nothing more special than being up there on a nice day. It's a magical spot, on the McAllister River. And I think once people get up there and experience it, and I think the calming it has, it's quite a special place.
Yeah.
And, look, there's been, I'd hate to think how many kids have been through there over the last 53 years. It'll be thousands and thousands. So really our responsibility now is to ensure that future generations of kids get the same opportunity. And we know that for many of them, it's a genuinely life-changing experience for a lot of young people. It's an amazing project. There's not too many Lions organisations, I think, that will have that sort of...
Definitely. I can't think of any other service clubs that have got that facility either, really.
Look, there are plenty of camps around the place. Licola's certainly not the only camp, that's for sure. We went to the Portsea camp recently to have a look there at their facilities, and we're going down to Cottage by the Sea next to have a look, because I think it's important that we understand what else is out there and what people are doing.
Yes, what's there, yeah.
Particularly, adapting to the post-COVID world. I know the Portsea camp, they came close to shutting the gates as a consequence of COVID.
Okay.
But they're back on track. The camps are occurring and tapping into the local community. They've turned it around quite nicely, which is what we're doing.
And Denis, perhaps not everybody out there knows that any Lion is welcome to attend the AGM.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of voting, each club is entitled to have one delegate there or one representative to vote, but certainly others can turn up. The room that we've got, the AGM is at the Mulgrave Country Club in Wheelers Hill, pretty central location for Metro and the regional Victoria. So, but that room only can take about 40 or so. Historically, there's normally 20 odd people turn up for the AGMs. If we get standing room only, then that's a good result. We'll make sure it's a quick meeting.
Good.
What date and time is it?
It's June the 25th. It's a Sunday, 11 p.m. The room that we've got is right beside the bistro. That opens at midday. So I imagine people may want to stay on and have a drink and lunch or whatever afterwards. Send an email to myself or David Underhay, the treasurer, the secretary, and we will make sure that you are put on the list.
Okay. I hope you have standing room only.
That'll be good, wouldn't it?
It would be lovely. Denis, is there anything else you'd just like to add?
Look, I think I've covered everything, Megan, that I'd want to, other than, if you've got some spare funds sitting in your activities account that you don't know what to do with, please, we would be happy to send you our bank details. You can send us a cheque or make a bank transfer. Money is always welcome and absolutely essential.
Thank you so much, Denis. I really appreciate your time, and thank you for...
Pleasure. Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Phil.
See you, Denis. Take care. We'll see you soon.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode about Licola. It is an absolutely fabulous asset for Lions Victoria, and I hope all the clubs out there will dig deep and just support Licola so it can get back on its feet.